What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Southern Sorcery. Today we're going to be breaking down one of my most anticipated precons from Modern Horizons 3. This is the Eldrazi Incursion deck. It's got the big bads, it's got the Eldrazi's. They're back, kind of, not in the story, but hey, it's new Eldrazi's, it's fun mechanics, so let's just dive into it. I'm super excited. I'm happy you guys are joining me on this exciting journey about exploring the spaghetti monsters, also known as the Eldrazi's. To win this deck, we're doing a bunch of contests right now for all four of the precons, so to win this deck, all we're asking is just drop us a comment, like on this video, letting us know like what you would add, what you would take away, maybe the strategy. This deck has a lot of different strategies to it. It's not just, you know, dropping big stompy Eldrazi's. It can be that, but the strategy that I went with is a little different. I'm excited to showcase that. So yeah, just comment what you would change. Be thoughtful with your answer. We're not just going to pick like, hey, pick me type answers. We review every answer, and then we submit those into a list that we go into final drawing for, and then the winner gets chosen. So just be thoughtful with your answer. Yeah, all right, without further ado, let's dive in. The two commanders for this deck. Ulalik, the Fuse Atrocity, is the face commander. It is either 5 colorless or Wooburg, so it has the split mana symbols where you can pay either or. This card has Devoid, so it is colorless technically, even though it does have the 5 pips for Wooburg. And it says, whenever you cast an Eldrazi spell, you may pay 2 colorless. If you do, copy all spells you control, then copy all other activated and triggered abilities you control. You may choose new targets for the copies. I love this because this is the theme that I went for, is specifically that mechanic for Ulalik. Now, not to say that this next card wasn't very tempting to make the deck, and I think I may come back to it and build the deck with this too, because it makes little Eldrazi spawns matter. But the second card I want to talk about is Azlask, the Swelling Scourge. This is the secondary commander, I guess, the non-face one. This card says whenever Azlask, the Swelling Scourge, or another colorless creature you control dies, you get an experience counter. So it's kind of kicking back to the experience counter days back in what, like 2015 commander, when all 4 commanders had to experience. Anywho, you can pay Wooburg. So what that means is white, blue, black, red, green, all 5 colors in Magic. So you can pay that as many times as you want and keep paying into it, but creatures you control get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of experience counters you have. Scions and Spawns, which are important because this deck generates a ton of those. You control gain Indestructible and Annihilator 1, which Annihilator says when you attack, a target player has to sack a permanent on attack trigger. It's just disgusting, and it's always been like an Eldrazi feature, so I'm glad they brought it back, because that's what makes Eldrazi super nasty. But they get Annihilator 1 until end of turn, so it makes all those little 0/1s become, you know, a lot more viable. They can actually be swung with. They're not just mana fodder anymore. So I really love this card, but I'm going to play with both, both cards. Ulalik is going to be the commander in my build, and then Azlask is going to be a part of the 99 and a potential win con based upon some of the interactions that I have. So without further ado, let's just take a gander at some of the new cards they've added for this deck, because that's what the excitement's all around. So we're going to start off with our first new card, and that is Ulamog's Dreadsire. This is a 10 drop, so 10 colorless mana for an Eldrazi. It has Vigilance and Ward, sacrifice a permanent with mana value 1 or greater. So kind of like a roundabout Annihilator type ability. But then the cool feature, it has tap, create a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi creature token. So if you have a way to manipulate this creature to tap untap, you can make infinite 10/10s, which is pretty nasty. And then it itself is a 10/10. The next card we want to look at is going to be the Benthic Anomaly. This is an Eldrazi Serpent. This card is 6 and a blue. It has Devoid, so this card has no color, even with the blue mana that you spend on it. However, it says when you cast this spell, for each opponent, choose a creature that player controls. Create a token that's a copy of one of those creatures, except its base power is equal to the total power of those creatures. Its base toughness is equal to the total toughness of those creatures. And it's a colorless Eldrazi creature. So pretty cool, because it's going to, you know, in Commander, obviously you've got up to 3 opponents. So this card has a lot of like benefit. It's nice because you're going to get to, you know, cheat some stuff. I like that, because copying stuff is kind of the theme of the deck in a roundabout way, but this is going to be copying your opponent's stuff. So a pretty fun Serpent to play with. The next card we're going to look at is the Eldritch Immunity. This is a Kindred instance, so Kindred has replaced what the former text used to be tribal instance. So if you remember like the Lorwyn block where they had like tribal instance or tribal sorceries, that's the new wording for it is Kindred instant for Eldrazi. This is a 1 colorless, and it says target creature you control. This is an instant. Target creature you control gains protection from each color until end of turn, which is nice because you're playing colorless spells for the most part. All Eldrazi are colorless or have Devoid to make them colorless. Or you can overload it for 4 and a colorless. You may cast a spell for its overload cost, and if you do, change the target in its text to each, so it's going to give each of your creatures protection from each color until end of turn, which is pretty cool. You can use this to protect your stuff if there's like a mass targeting effect that's going on. You can also just use it to give your stuff protection from all colors, and if everyone's playing color creatures, then they can't block because they have pro color. So it's a win con. Yeah, it's a pretty fun card. I like it. Plus it's on theme because it's an Eldrazi spell where it's a Kindred instance, so it's going to trigger our commander because the commander wants to see Eldrazi spells get played, so we can then copy stuff. So just very on theme. The next card that we've got is the Selective Obliteration. I just love the naming convention for this card, but 3 and 2 colorless. Each player chooses a color, then exile each permanent unless it's colorless or it's only the color its controller chose. So a pretty unique way of kind of getting rid of stuff. Since we've got colorless stuff, we're fine. We're hoping everyone else has multicolored type things and not like singular color, because then we can actually wipe things. So if they choose green, they've got a bunch of green, red, green, blue, green, whatever. Like, it's not going to save them. They're just going to have to wipe all that stuff since it's a 1 or more color. The only way to save it is if it's colorless or it's only the color its controller chooses. So pretty unique, a very different approach to wiping the board, but kind of very much on theme for Eldrazi specifically. After that, we've got an Angelic Aberration. I love the art on this card. It's just super, like, I don't know, look, it almost looks like Shieldred, like the original artwork for Shieldred, the Apocalypse. So 5 and a white. This card has Devoid. It's an Eldrazi Angel. It has Flying and Vigilance. So Vigilance means, when it attacks, it doesn't tap. When an Angelic Aberration enters the battlefield, sacrifice any number of creatures with base power toughness 1 or less. So a lot of our little 0/1 spawns could be the target here. Create that many 4/4 colorless Eldrazi Angel creature tokens with Flying and Vigilance. Another way to just use all those little 0/1 spawns and just make them into 4/4 angels that have Flying and Vigilance, which is a disgusting way to flood the board. I love it. This card's also a 4/4. I think an absolute bomb for sure. Next card after that we have is the Bismuth Mindrender. This is a new Eldrazi. This is 3 and a black, has Devoid, Menace, and then whenever Bismuth Mindrender deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. You may cast that card by paying life equal to the spell's mana value rather than paying its mana cost. Just a fun way to cheat stuff off of someone else's deck. Just a cool way to kind of gamble and see what's going on. You playing against the dinosaur, the dragon player, you're probably going to hit, a pretty fat creature that's going to want to do a lot of damage. What better way to turn it onto the Eldrazi side with Bismuth Mindrender. Super cool card, like it. The next card after that is going to be Hideous Taskmaster. This card is 6 and 1 red. It also has Devoid. Notice pretty much they'll all have Devoid if they have color in the casting cost. For the most part, there are some exceptions. But whenever you cast this spell for each opponent, gain control of up to 1 target creature that player controls until end of turn. Untap those creatures. This is the fun part. They gain Trample, Haste, and Annihilator 1 until end of turn. So this could also just be a game-winning card. And then the card itself has Trample, Haste, and Annihilator 1. So I just love the fact that they're bringing Annihilator back for the Eldrazi's. They kind of dialed it back because people complained how powerful Annihilator is, and it is. But that's what makes the Eldrazi so freaking scary. They're giant spaghetti monsters that just come attack you. Like, they need Annihilator. Like, most of them are not indestructible, so naturally they don't have a lot of ways to get around kill spells. So there's ways to deal with it. I think it's fair. It's fair. The next card after that we have is Twins of Discord. This is a 7-drop, an 8/6, and it says whenever you attack, choose odd or even. Creatures with a mana value of that quality can't block this turn. 0 is considered even. And each other colorless creature you control has Bloodthirst 2, which is a pretty cool mechanic. It says if an opponent was dealt damage this turn, that creature enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So incentivizes you to play those Eldrazi spells after the combat, so that way they can come in with that Bloodthirst 2 mechanic. I think that I like this card a lot. It's fun. It's very, Eldrazi-y, especially with the evens or odds. I think Void Winnower was an older Eldrazi that had that type of mechanic, and You know, it's basically like whenever this creature is in a battlefield, like I think even spell creatures can't attack or block. It's just goofy, but it's fun. It's like super like powerful, but it's like, what? Like that's such a random ability, but again, it's Eldrazi. After that, we have the Mutated Cultist. This is 2 and a black for an Eldrazi Horror with Devoid. When you cast this spell, remove all counters from up to 1 target permanent or opponent. The next spell you cast this turn costs 1 less to cast for each counter removed this way, and it has Death Touch for a 1/3. Beautiful card. You can remove, you know, people that are abusing counters, +1/+1 counters, you know, whatever the case may be. Heck, you could even save someone that's about to die to Infect that has 9 poison counters. Whatever you want to do. Maybe that poisons you. Maybe someone's trying to poison you out and you play this and you can say bye-bye all the poison counters. A lot of ways to manipulate this card and really just, you know, make it just come in, remove a ton of counters, make your Eldrazi's essentially free, and then just drop something that's a bomb. Love this card very, very much, like just a bomb. After that, we have Eldrazi Confluence. This is 2 and 2 colorless, so you can spend 2 any type of mana, and then the other 2, the diamonds that you see there, those specifically have to come from things that produce colorless mana, so like wastes, your mana rocks, just stuff that specifies colorless mana. This is an instant, and it says choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once, which is cool. Target creature either gets +3, -3 until end turn, so you can kill something because it's giving it a -3 on the back end. Exile target non-land permanent, then return it to the battlefield tapped under its under control. So if you want to bounce something that has an ETB trigger, you can manipulate that. Or you can just make a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature token with sack this creature, add a colorless mana. Just another way to add more Eldrazi's and make your army bigger. Just a lot of answers that can be had with this card. I love it. Only thing I wish is it was a tribal / kindred card, so it would trigger the Eldrazi mechanic, but that might make it a little too broken. Who knows? The next card we have is a Spawn Bed Protector. This is a 7-drop. This is a big Eldrazi. It's a 6/8. And it says, at the beginning of your end step, return up to 1 target Eldrazi creature card from your graveyard to your hand, which is nice because people want to get rid of these things. So this has a little bit of recursion. And then you just get to create 2 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature tokens with sacrifice this creature, add a colorless. Great. You know, at the beginning of your end step, you're just going to get 2 of these creatures you can block with. You can sack them for mana. If you've got an army building up, you've got your army. Just a great card. Plus, on top of it, you're getting an Eldrazi back. Love it. And it's a 6/8 at the end of the day, which is also just fantastic. From there, we have Chittering Dispatcher. This is 2 and a green with Devoid. And it has Myriad, so that means when it attacks, it's going to create a copy of itself, attacking each opponent you control. So it could be up to 3 of these guys attacking if you have all 3 opponents still in play. But it says whenever it leaves the battlefield, so your tokens do leave the battlefield after they attack from Myriad, create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifice this creature, add a colorless. So you can kind of start to see some of the built-in themes with making these 0/1s, these Scions, the spawns. That's because if we go back to look at Azalisk, the whole mechanic behind that commander, if you built it that way, is just to overrun the board with, you know, these spawn Scions, make them big, make them matter, give them Annihilator, and just make everybody, you know, be sad because they got stomped by not big Eldrazi, but tiny Eldrazi. So tiny Eldrazi matter too. It's what this deck's all about. From there we have Inversion Behemoth, which is a 2 and 2 colorless, so just 4 mana total. It has a really cool mechanic that I think is just very fun and can be super interactive. At the beginning of combat on your turn, switch the power and toughness of any number of target creatures until end of turn. So you just get to dictate who's going to swap what. There's a lot of creatures that can die. Anything that's got a 0 power but has toughness, just switch it. And as soon as that toughness becomes 0, it's dead. So you can answer a lot of things that are out there. Ornithopter of Paradise, really any Thopter for the most part. Ornithopter itself. There's just tons of stuff that has like 0/1 type abilities, and you can switch it. This card itself is a 2/9, so you could target it and make it a 9/2 and swing it at somebody, and that's 9 damage. So a lot of cool things, a lot of cool mechanics that can be done with this card. I think it's very fun, very flavorful too. Moving on, we have Snapping Void Crawl. This is an Eldrazi turtle, so not even the turtles are safe. For 1 blue and a green, this card has Devoid, of course, but it has tap to add 2 colorless, which is nice because we're going to need those type of cards that specifically give us the colorless mana. And then you can pay 3 and a colorless to tap it and draw a card. So just a type of a mana rock plus a draw mechanic on it. Plus it's an Eldrazi turtle, so, you know, there you have it. Didn't have one before, now we do. After that, we have a Glaring Flesh Raker. This is 2 and a colorless, just a very intimidating name. This is an Eldrazi drone that is a 2/2, but it says whenever you cast a colorless spell, which we're going to cast nothing but colorless spells for our creatures and some other stuff. Create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token. With sacrifice this creature, add a colorless, just more of the same. And then whenever another colorless creature enters the battlefield under your control, Glaring Fleshraker deals 1 damage to each opponent. What, you know, we're gonna make all these things. They're gonna come into play. This thing's gonna ping people like crazy. Yeah, it's just great. I mean, what can I say? It's just a masterpiece for what this deck's trying to do. Moving on there, if we have a Wastescape Battle Mage, this is an Eldrazi wizard, so they even have wizards. For 1 and a colorless, and it has kicker. You can either pay a kicker of a green and or 1 and a blue. When you cast a spell, if it was kicked with its green kicker, exile target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. So this is an answer. And then on the reverse side, when you cast a spell, if it was kicked with its 1 and blue kicker, return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. So just a lot of good answers. It can exile things, it can bounce things, just a unique, you know, type of Eldrazi that has answers versus just being a big Eldrazi that hits the battlefield and starts swinging. So I like that card. It's good to have answers on creatures because we're trying to play Eldrazi's to basically make our commander do its thing. Moving from there, we have Titan's Vanguard. This is another fun Eldrazi. This is 3, a red and a green. This says whenever you cast this spell and whenever Titan's Vanguard attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each colorless creature you control, and it has trample with a 5/5. That matters because all of those 0/1s that we're making, or the 1/1s we're making, they're just going to keep getting bigger and bigger because of this thing. We're going to obviously be okay to attack with it because it's a 5/5 with trample, so there's going to be somebody that could probably swing. You can swing with that and not worry about it getting killed, but the cool thing about it is it's going to get a trigger on cast, and then it's going to get a trigger on attack, so even if it does die after combat, you're at least going to get 2 triggers from it potentially and make all those Eldrazi spawns and tokens just a lot bigger because they're colorless creatures. After that, we have the 2 new lands. This one, so there's 5 of them total, but this is the 2 that it has. A Twisted Landscape. This is a land that can tap for a colorless, or you can tap to sacrifice it, search your library for a basic swamp, mountain, or forest, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle, or it has cycling for the 3 colors that it can search for, black, red, and green. Cycle to draw a card. Really cool card because it taps for a colorless, which we want. But at the end of the day, if you want to go get, you know, specific color mana, it has the ability to do that. You can go get triomes because it's specifying land types. You can go get dual lands, shock lands, you know, anything that has those land types, it has the ability to do that. So just a really good card. I mean, people say power creep is, you know, maybe not real, but like even the basic lands nowadays are just, you know, not basic lands, but like the common lands are just super powerful. And then on the reverse side, you have Tranquil Landscape, which is the same thing. You can tap to add a colorless or sack it to go get a basic forest, plains, or island, put it on the battlefield tapped, or cycle it for the same colors, green, white, blue, to draw a card. But those are our new cards. Yeah, let me know in the comments what you think about these new cards. These are, you know, in my opinion, they did a really good job of really sticking to a couple themes for the commanders, the 2 commanders that you could run. Azalisk obviously is just wanting to manipulate those spawns and those tokens as much as possible. And then Ululek is just trying to, you know, play Eldrazi so you can use this mechanic to pay 2 colorless and make a lot of copies, so you can copy triggered abilities, activated abilities, and then the spells you control, which is bonkers, which is like, again, the theme that I'm getting into. So that's what we're going to talk about next is like, all right, Shane, like you've got your theme, but how does this work regarding, you know, the deck? So let's talk about that a little bit. So what I want to do is I want to run a couple different things in my deck. I want to run things that give me flash because I want to hold priority when I cast my Eldrazi spells. I want to run other kindred spells. So there's a lot of shapeshifter spells that can also trigger Ulik because they're of every type, so they're cheap too. And then I want to have stuff that, you know, my Eldrazi's have, not necessarily when they're cast, but when they enter the battlefield, so ETB effects, so my copies are able to pay that off. So let's look at some of the additions and subtractions that I took into account for that type of strategy. The first thing I'm going to look at is my flash, and my flash enablers. But before that, let's just talk about, there's one specific card I wanted to add to Mana Rock that I think that just has to be in here. It's Thran Dynamo. It's the one artifact that I said, you know, I've got to add. For it, I took out Hedron Archive to add what I would consider a better Mana Rock in Thran Dynamo. Thran Dynamo is 4 colorless mana. You can tap it to add 3. So immediately you pay 4, you can tap it for 3. So you're really only out 1 mana as far as like the casting goes. And this is going to be nice because it's going to feed into a lot of the things that require that colorless mana. So no brainer, I think it just belongs in the deck. I'm kind of surprised it didn't come in the pre-con already because they're not very expensive. They're around maybe $2-ish, $1 and some change. But then moving on to my first strategy, I wanted to make sure that I had flash enablers. Why I wanted flash enablers is because, again, I want to hold priority when I cast Eldrazi spells, so I can cast either more Eldrazi creatures or things that I can do at instant speed that normally I can't unless they have flash. So why, do we add it? That's why, because we want flash. Leyline of Anticipation is the first card I want to talk about. An enchantment for 2 and 2 blue. If Leyline of Anticipation is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it. That's great because you don't have to pay anything for it. You just get it for free. If something happens, and it's crazy. Usually when that happens turn 1, you can just expect a lot of nuts stuff to happen because they're going to drop stuff left and right. And you may cast spells as though they had flash. So anything and everything now has flash. A great card for that specific type of mechanic. What I cut for that was Kozilek's Return. It's more or less a burn spell with Eldrazi theme. To me, like, there's just a lot of stuff that didn't make sense in this deck, and I understand because, like, when you look at this deck from a financial standpoint and you say like, oh my gosh, Shane, it's just no brainer, like, let's add all the Eldrazi Titans. Yeah, sure, like, I get that, and I think that would be a great idea and just a fun way to play, but you gotta take into consideration most of those cards are $30, $40, $50 and up. Really adds up quick. You're gonna pay more for the additions and a handful of cards than you did for the entirety of the deck. So this is why we went this route, to kind of keep it within a budget-friendly approach. But I'm not saying that's a bad strategy because those Titans are just bomb, especially the new ones. We won't spend a lot of time going over those, but gosh, they're so fun. Like the new Emrakul, all of it, Ulamog, they did Kozilek good. All of them are so good. So those will definitely, I'm sure, get a lot of comments like, oh, you gotta have them. So I get it, trust me. The next card I want to talk about, though, that I added was Vedelkin Ori. In same manner for flash, this is an artifact version of Leyline. But for 4 mana, you can pay it, and then it says you may cast spells as though they had flash. For Vedelkin Ori, I took out Everflowing Chalice. Everflowing Chalice is very much like a hit or miss mana rock for me. It does submit a lot of, reasoning because it can be kicked a bunch of times for colorless mana. But I think, again, my flash strategy, I have to have these pieces out because I want to really manipulate copying spells with my commander, so that's why Vedelkin Ori made it. After that, we've got Liberator, Urza's Battlethopter, one of the very few, if not only, non-Eldrazi creatures in the deck. It almost hurt my heart to add it because it's, not an Eldrazi, but at least it's a Thopter. It's just an art, just a machine. It's not really a creature per se, so it made the list. But it is 3 for flash. It has flash itself, so you can flash it in. Has flying, and then it says you may cast colorless spells and artifact spells as though they had flash. Again, that's fine because most of our stuff is going to be colorless, so that this card fits really well. And then whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast that spell is greater than Liberator Urza's Battlethopter power, put a +1/+1 counter on Liberator, which will probably be the case because most of these Eldrazi's are big, and then Liberator is pretty small, so eventually you might just have a big Liberator that you can fly and hit somebody with. Not really the main strategy for having in the deck, the flash is, but still not a bad strategy because it could get big and it has flying. For the Urza's Battlethopter, I cut Dreamstone Hedron. After that, we have some lands that help us out with flash. We have Alchemist Refuge. Again, it's going to tap to add a colorless mana, so a good land to have already in the deck. And then for a green and blue, you can tap it and you may cast non-land cards this turn as though they had flash. So another really cool way to kind of cheat and get yourself some flash and manipulate some stuff with that ability. And then for the Alchemist Refuge, we cut the Temple of Malady. The temples are just, I don't know, they're just an easily cuttable land because they come in tapped. Yeah, scrying is nice, but there's just better lands, especially Alchemist Refuge in this theme. It gives us flash on a land. Lands necessarily don't get removed a lot, so this is a good way to kind of keep that strategy in play without removal. After that, we have another land that kind of does the exact same thing. We have Emergence Zone. This is a land that can tap for a colorless, or you can pay 1, tap it to sacrifice it, and you may cast spells this turn as though they had flash. So this is a more one and done type strategy, but it's nice again to have it on a land because the land's going to see a lot of use anyway because it's going to give us colorless mana, so we can use that, tap it, for whatever Eldrazi we're trying to play or mechanic we're trying to enable, or we can just go ahead and sack it and then go ham on a turn where we have to have flash to do certain things. So for that one, we took out Temple of Silence. The other temple, again, I think the temples are pretty easily cuttable. After that, we're gonna move into our last land. This is one of the more expensive cards that I added. This card averages anywhere from 10 to like $15 depending on condition. I think it's because there's only one printing from Weatherlight, which is an older set. But this is Winding Canyons. This is a land that does something very similar to the effect of what we've been trying to do With Flash, this is tap to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, or pay 2 and tap it. Until end of turn, you may play creature cards whenever you could play instants. So this one just focuses on creatures, but that's fine because that's what we need to have Flash anyway. Not a ton of sorceries we're trying to manipulate. It's mostly creatures, Eldrazi specifically, so we can manipulate our commander, hold priority, and try to keep chaining. It's almost like a storm payoff, and try to keep copying Eldrazi so we can get as many copies of them as we can. But those are going to be all of our Flash payoffs, essentially, or our enablers. From there, these are the older cards. Again, these are the ones that say tribal instant, but now they've been errated to be the kindred instance. So these are from Lorwyn. There's one that's actually, I think all 4 of them are for Lorwyn. Yeah, they're just, I added them because they have a changeling effect, even though they don't specifically say Eldrazi. These cards are instances that had changeling. They haven't done this a ton, so you may have not have seen stuff like this. They're very niche, I guess would be the word. But in this deck, I just got to thinking, like, if we can, pay smaller mana cost to activate our commander's ability to copy stuff, that's a lot easier to chain together Eldrazi's, because oftentimes they're expensive. And if we want bigger payoffs, just to kind of get the chain started, to have those smaller instances go off and trigger it, that would be, a cool way of doing it. So that's my unique approach. Maybe people have thought of this strategy before with this commander, maybe not, but let me know in the comments if you think this is a viable way of doing things. I think it is. It seems pretty fun. But let's start off and look at these. This first one we're gonna look at is the Blades of Velis Veil. This is 1 and a red. It is a tribal instant, a shapeshifter. It says changeling. This card is every creature type at all times. So even though it's not really a creature, it has a creature on an instant. Very cool mechanic. They just, like I said, they don't use it a ton, but it is around. So technically, since it's every creature type, Eldrazi fits that mold. It just says up to 2 target creatures each get +2/+0 and gain all creature types on a turn. We're not really after it for that. We're just after it for the fact that it's a spell that we can manipulate. It's an instant, so we don't have to have Flash necessarily to use it. It's instant speed, so we can do it at any point, and we can start chaining together some copies and then drop a creature at instant speed. Or maybe it's our turn. Even if we don't have a Flash enabler, we can use these as kind of a substitute for that. Again, I went for smaller CMCs for that strategy. That's why that's in here. The next one is Shields of Velis Veil. Same concept. This one's just 1 white to cast though. Has changeling. This card is every creature type at all times, and it says creature target player control get +0/+1 and gain all creature types until end of turn. So I mean, at the least, you're kind of adding some defense to all your creatures. That's pretty fun. But again, we're just trying to get that changeling trigger to happen, so we have Eldrazi spells on the stack. And then the last one of that set is Wings of Velis Veil. Same concept here. It's 1 and a blue changeling. This card is every creature type at all times. A target creature becomes 4/4, gains all creature types, and gains flying until end of turn. So hey, turn one of your 0/0/1s into a 4/4. That's not terrible. And then for those 3, I'm sorry, we have one more. A Nameless Inversion will be the last one of our tribal instance shapeshifters. This one has changeling as well. This card is every creature type at all times. Again, this one could remove something potentially. It just says target creature gets +3/-3 and loses all creature types until end of turn. So if you want to target something on your opponent's side that has a toughness 3 or less, you could kill it with this card. Or if you want to buff something on your end just to give it +3 and it can survive the -3, there's, like I said, there's some little added benefits to these cards. But again, we're just focusing on the smaller CMC, the casting costs of the cards to trigger our commander. But those 4, essentially, we cut some of the other stuff. We cut the, let's take a look here. For the for the Blades of Velis Veil, we cut Ugin's Insight. For the Shields of Velis Veil, we cut Suffer the Past. For the Wings of Velis Veil, we cut Bonder's Enclave. It's one of the lands. And then for Nameless Inversion, we just talked about, we cut the Tectonic Edge, which is another land that I thought could be cut because it had a lot of lands in it, and we were adding lands back with some of the flash lands. So I think total the deck has about 37 lands, including the 2 new ones. So pretty high up there. It is 5 color technically, but with it all being colorless, you can kind of get away from the mana fixing side because you're not so much worried about Wooburg, since there's a lot of just colorless stuff that you can use instead. But those are, like I said, the kindred instances, formerly known as the tribal instances, just to kind of get that changeling aspect in there. After that, let's look at some of the Eldrazi's we're going to add for the payoffs. These are the ones that like have ETBs, stuff that we, if we have copies, that it's going to matter. Because we're going to play it, we're going to use our commander's ability for 2 mana, and then we're going to copy these spells. So hopefully we're going to, anytime we play these, we're going to have at least another version, if not, 3 or 4 of the same card coming into play. The first one is It That Heralds the End. This is just an awesome mana rock for Eldrazi creatures. It says colorless spells. This is a 1 and a colorless Eldrazi drone. The colorless spells you cast with mana value 7 or greater cost 1 less to cast, so it's going to reduce a lot of our expensive Eldrazi. And then another one is just a buff, so for all those little tokens we're making, other colorless creatures you control get +1/+1. So to have multiple copies of it, you're just antheming out the wazoo for your creatures to be +2/+2, +3/+3, etc. Moving on from there, we have Forerunner of Slaughter. This is a Rakdos color card. It has black and red with the void, and it says you can pay 1, and it says target colorless creature gains haste until end of turn. It's just nice because a lot of our stuff doesn't have haste, so if we do have a turn where we make a bunch of copies and we really need to attack right off the bat, we could have Forerunner of Slaughter be that creature that gives us haste. It's also a cheap Eldrazi, so it's another cheap way to pay into our commander's ability and start the storm, this kind of the pseudo storm count, because we copy. Moving from there, we have the Catacomb Sifter. This is more on theme with our 1/1 search for our other commander, but this is just a good card because think about having 3 or 4 copies of this come into play. You've got 1, a black, and a green. It has the void. Whenever Catacomb Sifter enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Sign creature token onto the battlefield. It has sacrifice this creature, add 1 to your mana pool, and then it says whenever another creature you control dies, scry 1. So it's a cool way to scry. Like I said, if you have 3 of them come into play, you're going to have 3 more 1/1 Scions also enter the field at the same time, so it's just a good payoff for the ETB type effect. Something similar to that is the Void Grafter. This is 1 green and a blue. This card has flash built in, so it's a perfect fit for the deck. It says whenever it ETBs, enters the battlefield, another target creature you control gains hexproof excuse me, until end of turn. Really cool mechanic, because if you have the mana to pay for it and start that copy train, you can save a lot of your Eldrazi that maybe people are trying to spot remove or just do some general shenanigans with. So it's going to give them hexproof and protect them. So just any type of protection in these type of decks is going to be much needed, because Eldrazi's do get targeted quite a bit. Another interesting card that has a really unique ETB is Thought Not Seer. I thought not. A Thought Not Seer is 3 and a colorless, and it says whenever it enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-land card from it and exile that card. And whenever it leaves the battlefield, target opponent draws a card. So it's interesting, because if you make 3 or 4 of these, again with the copy mechanic, you can essentially like cherry pick a lot of cards. If you know people have stuff, if they've tutored, if you know stuff is in their hand, or if you just think someone's got a threat, you're gonna be able to look. And then if you got copies and you look, you can go right back to that person and do it again because you've already looked at their hand. So pretty interesting mechanic. There is a downside if it does die, that target opponent draws a card, but I think the payoff is way better, because you're able to cherry pick stuff out of their hand that's going to possibly mess with your board, or just do something that you don't like. Which Eldrazi's, they just want Eldrazi's. Eldrazi's want Eldrazi. And then the last card that I added was Eyeless Watcher. Eyeless Watcher is 3 and a green for an Eldrazi drone, and this card has the void. Of course, they all do. I've said that ad nauseum. When Eyeless Watcher enters the battlefield, put 2 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Sign creature tokens on the battlefield. They have sacrifice this creature, add 1 to your mana pool, just like the rest of them do. But again, 3 or 4 copies of this card. You've got a bunch of 1/1s, and then you're going to have a bunch of other 1/1s because it's bringing in 2. So, 3 copies of this come in, you're going to get 2, 4, 6 1/1s to come in with as well. So it's just those ETB payoffs. There's a lot of Eldrazi that say when you cast the spell, you get it. So that's necessarily not the best to copy, because you're not casting the copy. So that's why I shifted to some of the smaller Eldrazi's. This deck, again, makes small Eldrazi's matter, because we've got a lot of ways to manipulate the board to give us Anthem effects to add +1/+1s. That secondary commander alone can do it with experience counters, so and gives them Annihilator, so it's even scarier. So that's why I went with the generic, just kind of the ETB smaller Eldrazi's. 1, their smaller CMC cost is also going to be an effect for our commander to be able to trigger a lot more. And then 2, it's just, a lot easier to chain those together. But that is the deck's, main purpose. Those are my cuts. Let's go over the cuts for the creatures. Let's see. We did at It That Heralds the End, we took out the Oblivion Sour. The Forerunner of Slaughter, we took out Morphon the Boundless. The Catacomb Sifter, we took out the World Breaker. The Thought Not Seer, I took out Vile Redeemer. The Eyeless Watcher, we took out the Elder Deep Fiend. And then that is that. The Urza's Battlethopter, the Dreamstone Hedron, I think we spoke about that already, but those are all the creatures We talked about some of the new cards that was added. Again, I think this deck has a lot of potential with either commander. If you want to go a different route with it, I'm excited to learn like what your strategy would be with this commander, especially just that copy effect. Even if you didn't want to go a Eldrazi route, the fact that it can copy all the spells and triggered abilities you control, and you may choose new targets for the copies and its activated abilities as well. I think it's bananas. It could be another version of like Dragon that we've seen in the past, where it's not necessarily dragons, it's shapeshifters, it's changelings, and so there's a lot of things that can be manipulated and added that are pseudo Eldrazi, so to speak. So very excited to hear what you guys have for me as well, as far as adds, additions, subtractions, all that good stuff. And then if you just want to run the secondary commander Azlask, that to me, that's it. I think I'm gonna have to do a video on it, or make it at least, and play it. I think it's just so much fun because this deck just comes equipped, and there's so many other things you can add that has it, where you're making so many of those spawns and scions that are 0/1s, 1/1s, and then you're just making them gigantic, because they've always been around, but they've never really been manipulated other than just sacking them for mana, because that's their main purpose. But giving them Annihilator 1, let's say you have 30 of them, that's Annihilator 30 coming. I mean, but yeah, let me know in the comments what you think. I'm interested to see, specifically on some of the add subtractions. Let me know my strategy, if you guys think that's a viable strategy. I kind of picked my own brain on that, just to see if it would work, especially with those kindred spells, the kindred instances, just to see if that shapeshifter type theme with the lower CMCs would work, and the flash mechanics, the hold priority, so we can respond to our own stuff. I dropped an Eldrazi, I want to hold priority, I want to flash in something. I think that would be a fun one, because there's no really way to copy a bunch of spells without flash, creature spells I should say, and so that was why my mind went there first, to see if we could break it in that way. But let me know, short and simple, just let me know what your thoughts are. I really appreciate it. Again, please be thoughtful with your answers. We're excited to give these decks away. This one's going to be super fun. It's already like $100 and some on TCG Player. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to get an expensive deck, and you can brag to your friends about it. So, shout out to everybody that's already watched a couple of our other videos. We're going to continue this series, and then after we've done all 4 videos, we're going to take some time and play test a lot of this stuff live, and see what we like, what we don't like, and maybe revisit some of the strategies. Maybe I hate the strategy, maybe the strategy's great and I'm a genius for making it. Time will tell, I guess. But again, thank you guys. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. We truly appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye.